All right.
Cool,
Well,
man.
thank you for listening to a developer's contractor. I'm your contractor and host, Emmanuel. And today with me is Sergio of Peralta Design Group, based out of San Diego. You're going to have to ignore me kind of reading my iPad a little bit. It's my first time doing this, but it's all good, man. So
you got it down.
Today's topic is actually going to be, like, it's a mouthful. It's going to be builder-friendly properties for multi-tenant residential.
Okay.
I felt like I just spewed out like a Jeopardy category or something. But anyway, that's the topic at hand.
Yeah.
Right. So let's just start with like what everybody wants to know. Like, what do you charge? And can I pay in pesos?
Right. Yeah.
No, man, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna have you answer that right away. Dude. No, seriously. So tell us a little bit about your background, right?
Yeah,
Tell us how you got started in design and what made you want to get into architectural design, if you will.
Right. I mean, if I were to go way back, I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I was always inclined into the arts and all that stuff. I didn't know about architecture until I was high school, pretty much. Freshman in high school, actually. And actually, one of my aunts, she studied architecture in Tec de Monterrey,
Mm-hmm.
And she's the one that's like, I was trying to figure out, early on what I wanted to be. I know I wanted to be something in the arts, but, painting or sculpture, all that kind of stuff, like it did resonate with me, but it didn't feel like a career path.
It's funny you say that because when you said artsy, or like not artsy, but like into the arts, my first thought is you're an artistic person, and when I think of architectural design, it feels it has to be mathematical, it has to be structured, it has to be symmetrical, right? So I wouldn't naturally, like, if you ask me, like, okay, say a word that comes to mind when you say art, it doesn't actually the first thing doesn't I don't think of architecture, but you just said it wasn't painting, it wasn't this, so it was more like a architectural design. But it's interesting that you say that, because when I think art, I'm like, oh, paintings, but not necessarily, right?
Well, architecture, I mean, there's a whole debate of what architecture is. Is it science? Is it is it art? But it's an artistic solution to a scientific problem. So it's a combination of things. You can approach it different ways. You can go back in history and learn about architecture that was done by the Greeks and then Romans and all that stuff, and you can look at a painting and create architecture based on paint.
Wow.
On a painting. There's different approaches you can take, but there's an element, a scientific element that you need to approach, like measurements and balance and square footage, and then you initially ask about the cost things of of building and all that, so that you start looking into those scientific, per se, type of approach. But there is, like I said, there's an artistic element to it. We're drawn by how beautiful a building is, how space makes us feel. How, based on the wind, how the light enters, whether it's the light from, passing through a window from the sun, or is it, a light bulb like, we're experiencing here now, things like that it all kind of creates an emotion.
Right.
So when I was, starting early on and when my aunt, she's like, hey, why don't you look at architecture, right? Kind of going back to that. So I was like, okay, it sounds like it just kind of clicked.
Yeah.
I was like, that sounds like the way that I need to go,
Awesome.
So I started, kind of painting my path in a way through high school. So I was, what was available for me. And
So you were already thinking, I'm going to be an architect in high school.
Yeah.
That's awesome, dude.
So
I was trying to decide what beer I'm gonna have my my cousin or my brother buy, but
that was on the weekends. But Monday through Friday, was what am I gonna do with architecture and how I'm going to get to that point, So, I was in the art classes, the advanced placement classes and all that stuff with art and all that stuff. And actually on my advanced placement art class, I did a portfolio with an architectural theme. And actually, my art teacher introduced me to the first ever architect I've ever, met in person. That wasn't my aunt. So he invited him to class, and we had a chat and all that stuff of how, the direction of my portfolio should be and all that stuff. And that kind of just continued inspiring me on continuing with that path. Then I went to community college, and then, eventually transferred to New School of Architecture and Design, which is here in San Diego in downtown. And then I got my bachelor's in architecture there. And then while I was in school there, during third year, that's when I started actually doing some drafting and work for people. Nice. And also realizing that just the path of architecture wasn't going to be enough, knowing about business of architecture, knowing about construction, at least have more of a sense of what that, let's say, Emmanuel's thinking about on that side of things, Then I did my master's in construction management. Awesome. So then I married those two things, and then, kind of self-teaching myself also, like how to run my business and all that stuff. And once I was out of school and all, but yeah, architecture is, like I said, very early on, I decided that's what I wanted to be, and nothing else kind of made sense to me. That was it. That was me.
Cool, dude. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I mean, I think it's pretty cool that you knew, even before you graduated high school, like, this is what I want to do, and then you just went that way, right? Like, I bet your parents are like, I'm proud of Sergio, because like most times, we as young people, we don't necessarily end up right where we need to be at the beginning. We go through, but I just think it's super cool that you kind of knew your path and you kind of went that direction. So kudos to you, man. I think that's cool.
Thank you.
And while you were talking, I was making sure that I opened this up because I want to make sure that I give the listeners what they want, sure, and at the same time I give you an opportunity to share a little bit about yourself, right? Sure. So
thank you.
With that being said, I think that I was putting together some questions today as I was thinking about the topic.
Yeah.
And if I was a developer, I think right now in San Diego, because this is geared towards them, right? So one of the things that I would be curious about is, what does that space look like right now? So what are these developers doing? Mm-hmm. Do you see a lot of activity? And what have you seen like over the past few years? Has it changed? Has it grown? Is it steady? Is it declining? What's your take on that?
Where's definitely there's been an uptick in the development in multifamily, especially the state of California has been trying to make it a lot easier for people to build. It started really small with the ADUs and all that stuff, and now when it first started, ADUs, you didn't. In the same topic, you didn't say multifamily and ADUs. Now you do. There's multifamily incentives for ADUs to be developed, and then there's the Senate Bill 9 that was introduced, I think last year or the year before, that it allowed you to do a secondary primary dwelling unit. So
where you like split your lot in half or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's one of the options.
SB9, SB10, they were kind of together, right?
No,
something
it's still like SB9. So SB9 gives you two options. It's a secondary primary unit or lot split.
Okay.
But in my experience, the ones that I've done, it's just the secondary primary unit.
Got it.
And so that allows you to have at least 4 units in a single family zone.
Explain how you go from what was before to now with that SB9, how that can create 4 units in a single family. That would be considered an R1, right?
R1 zone or RS1 in the city of San Diego. It's RS1 7, 6.
And I mention R's because I have a question about that later.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that. But yeah, just explain how you can take that home and turn it into 4 units.
Yeah, so the very basic form is the 2 ADUs, right? You have an ADU that it can be attached or detached. If we're talking about the city of San Diego, it can be up to 1,200 square feet, no matter what. And then you have a junior ADU for 500 square feet The only thing with that is that it's deed restricted. So it means that the owner has to be living in the primary unit while they have that junior ADU, and they make you sign a deed for that. Okay. And then but the state of California, guarantees under the ADU guarantees 800 square feet of an ADU, regardless of FAR, lot coverage, size of your lot. Doesn't matter. It allows you to do that. Okay. But it depends on where you are in the city of San Diego. Everybody has or adopted a version of that of the ADU ordinance per se.
Is that tied with the? And this is me going off a little off tangent, but is that tied to the Prop 33, where it's saying that cities will have more control over building permits and things like that?
Yeah, like they want to keep their cities, looking a certain way, or the amount of development that needs to go in. But in general terms, I mean, city of San Diego, county of San Diego, if you live in the unincorporated area of San Diego, they're the most generous in terms of ADUs.
They're friendly.
They're friendly with development and how many square footage and all that stuff. But if you're talking about Chula Vista, there's all sorts of breakdowns, square footage, how many bedrooms, is it attached or is it detached?
Right.
So, I mean, you really need to go city by city as far as research-wise to see what you can do, you cannot do, how many square feet and all that stuff, what kind of fees will be applied to the ADU development. So, but going back a little bit to your question in the development, yes, definitely in the multifamily, using also the affordable housing incentive, also with the Housing Commission, that developers are really, looking into that. There's a very recent development in Balboa Park area across the street. And then because they assigned affordable units in their development, they were able to get an incentive in the height restriction. So they were able to add more units and go higher.
That's something to the degree of a particular bid that I did, where he had a property that he bought. It was a 950 square foot house. And then he had a 10,000 square foot lot, and the plan was to put 7 units in the property, which would total 8. And here I am thinking, hey, I thought it was only an ADU and a JADU.
Yeah.
But yeah, he explained to me is that there's something to do with affordable housing. If you provide more of it, they'll basically give you more units. So I think that's a vital piece of information for developers to know. If they don't know it yet, right, and if they're just getting into it. Yeah. I think the consensus is if you look enough at what legislation is allowing you to do, there's less restrictions on the amount of units you can put in, as long as you go through the proper channels and through the proper cities, because some cities are going to have different things to say about the matter.
Yeah, and then the where I see the most of the ADU incentive and development and all that stuff, it's mainly city of San Diego.
Okay.
That's where I see the most development, the most talked about area, anything that it's within the city of San Diego boundaries, that it's where it's the city kind of like pushing you a little bit more to try to do that more.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of land that it covers, so there's more diversity and as far as the type of properties that they are, even in the single family zone. That you can, do those developments. Right. And one of the big incentives is also parking. Parking is always a headache when designing, because, it takes a lot of space. How many parkings would also equal how many bedrooms or units you can put in and all that stuff. So
my experience with parking is that developers don't want to pay for parking.
Yeah.
Right. When I look at a set of plans and it's asking for 3 parking spaces, 2, whatever the thing is the conversation usually goes like, yeah, I have to put them in. You know what I mean? It's the one that's putting in the 1 unit that's usually like, I want them to have a parking spot. But the developers are more, they're trying to maximize the living space, right? Yeah. And that's another topic. I'm sure that a lot of people have something to say about it, but
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, it helps right now to solve the solution of the demand of, of housing that it's needed in the city of San Diego. But what's gonna happen, I feel like there's gonna be so much development. These incentives are gonna evolve, and they're eventually gonna get more. There's gonna be restrictions back again.
Oh, okay. So it's gonna be like a give and take,
Yeah,
but ultimately more giving as we go, right? I joke with people because the thing I used to always say is that in 10 years, it's gonna feel more like if you've ever gone to Europe. Mm-hmm. And there's buildings all over the place, but there's not as many cars. And where you do see cars, they're all jam packed. Yeah. My wife, she's from Rota, Cádiz in Spain.
Okay.
And her, my father-in-law, he sends her messages like every 3 weeks or so, saying, "Oh, thank you for buying me the parking spot." So she had to buy like a little parking spot in the garage. They sell them like separate. So they sell they have the depas, los apartamentos, the units themselves. Yeah. But then downstairs in the garage, it's not like it comes with a parking spot.
Right.
It actually you have to buy the parking spot separate. So because she already has her mom there and everything, she decided to buy the parking spot. One, to help her dad. Yeah. But two, also saying, hey, well, eventually this thing's going to be worth some money. So it was kind of like a small little, it's like when you play Monopoly and you buy the little light blue ones, you know what I mean? It was kind of like that. Okay. But he's so happy about it. And it's because of that, right? Yeah. So, if he had to go to the grocery store, he didn't even want to move the car because he's like, if I don't find a parking spot, right? So I can see how over time, like right now, we feel like that sometimes, you know what I mean? Especially if you go downtown, right? Yeah. You're like, do I just fork out the $40? Yeah. Or do I try to find a parking spot, right? Mm-hmm. But you don't feel that in a lot of the areas, but eventually we will start to be that way if we just focus on building, right?
Yeah, and the effect is going to be at a micro scale level because it's not like a citywide development that it's, like you're saying, where your wife is, the entire city is designed that way. Mm-hmm. Here we're going to have lots, parcels, little islands around the city that it's going to be so dense that it's going to densify all the streets with parkings and cars and all that stuff. I feel like it's going to become... or it's going to evolve eventually where we're going to start designing parking areas, in within, maybe single family zones and all that stuff. And maybe, these developers going to eventually say, you know what, we need parking, or what's going to happen, all these ADUs are going to become more like condos. So now people are going to want parking for their condo that they're purchasing or whatever, because now there's another law so that now you can sell ADUs separately, right?
Right. So, and you create like an HOA, right? Yeah. So you create, and just because I want to touch on this again, when you do the 4-unit, and this is just a question I have because I just was thinking about. It used to be that, and it still is, that if you have a single family home, you're allowed a JADU and an ADU. So if in theory they're allowing you to put a separate unit, wouldn't that mean that the other house can also have a JADU and an ADU, making it 6? Or is that something that...
No, under Senate Bill 9, no. So then you would have to go through the ADU incentive route kind of thing. Okay. Where you can start adding. So I think the way it goes is for every affordable unit you provide, they allow you to develop another one. That's kind of like that's kind of almost like infinite.
Right.
And then you
as long as you fit the space, and then correct me if I'm wrong, but now you have to make sure that you don't surpass the ratio, right? So there's a ratio of how much space you need, that's not living space on a given property, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's the floor area ratio.
Right, floor area ratio. That's it.
There's the floor area ratio, but then, the incentive is also the development, right? So then you can ask for there's a different incentive depending on what percentage of units you assigned to be affordable housing. And there's different tiers within the affordable housing. What type of income within the affordable housing you are assigning to each unit. and then it goes into, it's almost like you're checking off boxes and see where you kind of like apply and how much you can develop. And then you ask for an incentive to the city and say, okay, I'm going to, assign 50% of my units are going to be affordable housing. And they'll be like, okay, your zoning restricts to 35 feet, high for a building because you're adding X amount. Now you can go to 45 or 55 or something like that.
And as a developer, I would assume that you're going to show up to a property and you're already knowing, okay, it's in this city, so this city's going to allow this. Yeah. And then it's going to have these restrictions. Yeah. And then based on the size of the property and what's around it, I'm going to go this route, whether it's 1 story, 2 story, 3 story, whatever. Mm-hmm. But yeah, right. So from what I'm gathering, it sounds like if we're looking at builder-friendly properties, the first step is, if you're in San Diego County, is probably choose the right city, which in this case, it sounds like San Diego has been the most advanced one with all the legislation, right? Yeah. Would you say that the other cities tend to take a little while, but they eventually get to the same point as San Diego? So like if they're allowing it in San Diego now, would you say that in Chula Vista, they're probably going to allow it in a year or two?
It's hard to say. I mean, it's if you look at the cityscape of Chula Vista, it's very low type of buildings throughout. I mean, you can go to downtown Chula Vista and, the tallest buildings are just recently being built across the courthouse. Right. And that's, pretty much what kind of setting the height of that. But that's a multifamily type building. And that's not, an ADU type of incentive. At least it doesn't look like there's a lot of parking there. Right. But City of San Diego has, the cityscape is a little bit taller. So there's more, let's say, opportunity or more, I guess opportunity. More room for the city to say, let's incentivize these developers to do, more units, taller buildings, kind of thing. Right. But yeah, I mean, but it's all within the single family zone. I mean, the multifamily zone remains the same. You can still add, ADUs within the multifamily zone, but there's different restrictions to that and how many and all that. And then that's also changing. Right. That's also changing. Right. But yeah, I mean, a good way to start with any, with a project, if you're like, obviously don't know anything about the parcel, anything, an architectural feasibility report can allow you to do that. There's different firms and companies that that can provide those type of reports.
You said it was an architectural feasibility report. That's the first time I hear that. That's awesome.
So it tells you everything you want to know about the parcel.
Do you provide those?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. Like, I'm assuming for like a fee, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. Yeah.
It's a small fee, but it's
kind of like if you're about to buy a car and you take it to like get inspected, to see if what you can anticipate, whether it's good or whether this is going on with it or what have you, right?
It's like it's a report about knowing about the parcel. How many units or what type of scenarios as far as development you can do and all that stuff. We can include in that report some investment and ROI type of numbers and, how much money you would be looking at investing depending on the option that we are providing or what is it that you're interested in. So let's say we're going back to the 4-unit per single family. So let's say you're looking at a scenario of the 2 ADUs, or you trying to do the 4 or just 1 ADU and what size, and kind of break it down for you and put it in a report where you have something physical with you and you can review, we can talk about, and it makes it easy to kind of like get you started. Now, if you wanted to go beyond what's presented and all that stuff, let's say you want to do affordable housing and all that stuff, then now would we can take it to that other level, but there will be a different type of research and development and all that stuff. But it'll be something very basic to, especially if you're starting as a developer, let's say. Okay. And you wanted to see, what would it take, cost wise, to get a project started. That would be something that
just because you mentioned it, you kind of alerted me to jump to one question that I had here. So, when I talk to, because right now most of our client base for the last couple years has been single family homes, people that want to put one ADU, one garage conversion, one ADU above their garage, right? And now we're starting to transfer more into the individuals that are looking to build multi-tenant stuff, right? So, a budget that I used to tell these single family homeowners looking to do this when it came to planning. Planning meaning the architectural, Title 24 energy with the energy consultant, structural, permits. I would tell people you might want to budget about 20 grand, right? That's what I would tell people more or less on the single family side, because they're usually building or converting, 500 to 800 square feet.
Yeah, the small scale stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
What would you say, if any, right? Because I don't want to hold you to it, but what would you say is a healthy budget for, let's say, I have one client right now, right? So he has 2 properties that he converted to triplexes, right? The house, the garage, and an ADU, right? That's what those properties had. But given him and his trajectory, he's eventually going to start looking into doing 4, 5, 8 units in a given property. What would you say is a healthy budget for him to have? Because I know that there's a bunch of other things that they're going to have to do once they break into that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 4 units or more, right?
Yeah. Let's say if you're doing a 4-unit cluster or a 3-unit cluster type of building, and they're all attached to each other and all that, then you're already adding another consultant, which is the MEP consultant into the mix.
So MEP is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So
exactly.
So that's where they want to see a plan just for how you're going to do all the mechanical. Then they want to see another separate sheet for how you're going to do all the electrical, and then they want to see another separate sheet for how you're going to do all the plumbing.
And it's prepared by an engineer.
Right.
It will stamp. It will stamp the plans and do all that stuff for you. But there are ways that you can still have several units, and there's like loopholes to kind of not have to do the MEP, for instance.
Tell me about that. I want to know about that.
So if you do multiple detached units of duplexes, let's say, or single units, and then you kind of repeat it, you kind of do an array of it.
Okay.
But they're not attached to each other.
Okay. So you're saying if you can avoid making a big cluster of 3 or more units, then you're going to avoid having to do these MEP plans. Now, developers are, they know their stuff better than you and I do, because I'm the builder, you're the architect, right?
Yeah.
But that's just a little nugget of information, right? That if they want to avoid MEP, then what they want to try to get away from is making triplex or more one building, right? Is that what I'm hearing? So if they're going to put a new freestanding building, it should not be more than 2 units. More than 2 units,
yeah. A duplex,
okay. Okay.
But on a already developed site. So,
got it.
Right.
It's funny because that same one that I'm telling you about, the first building was I think it was a 2 or 3 bedroom, 1,100 square foot unit, and then the other 3 buildings were 2 unit buildings, and now I know why they did it, because they wanted to avoid the MEP.
Yeah, I mean it's when you're getting into this development world. I mean you're trying to crunch numbers all the time,
right?
So if you can find a way to save some money on the soft cost, of things of doing the design and all that stuff, when you repeat that, let's say you have 2 or 3 properties, you multiply that by the fee and all that, then, you're looking at some real numbers.
I'm sorry. I have to be honest, man. There was one client, and we try to in this business, we try to be as honest as possible, but we can only be as good as we are at that point in time. Right. Sure. And there was a client I'm remembering, way back when I first started, we were getting ready to, she wanted to do a 4-plex, right? She wanted to do 4 units, and her passion was creating housing, low income housing for people. She just had this huge heart where she just wanted to do that for people, and she also wanted to set something up for her son, and so that it could be a property that she could. But the reason I mention this is because I'm just having this epiphany that we were like, whether you do a 4-plex or 2 buildings and 2 doesn't make a big difference. Well, here we are. I think hers was like 40 grand later because she had to do MEP. The designer that was involved, I think they didn't realize that they had to do that because they brought it to a fourplex. Yeah. Now we feel like we're already in. Yeah. And in retrospect, with what you're saying, had she just done 2 freestanding buildings with 2 units in each one, she would have avoided a lot of extra planning and costs and things like that. So I think I know I'm circling around this particular thing, but I think it's important for the people that are just starting. I'm thinking of William, who's one of my clients, right? Yeah. I think it's important to note, right? Yeah. Because what you may look at a property and you're an up and coming developer, you go to a property, you scope it out, you don't have the knowledge to get this, was it the feasibility report? You don't have the knowledge to do that, and you just say, yeah, I'm going to buy it and I'm going to put 1 building with 4 units on it. And you start going that route. And then you get with an architect that also isn't as savvy, and they start submitting that to the city. Yeah. And then the city tells them. So I think it's important just to touch on this particular topic of the separation of units. Yeah. So that as developers go to look, they have this piece of information with them where I would say it has to make financial sense for their given goals to get into an MEP plan. Yeah. Otherwise, you probably want to avoid it. I would say if you're starting out, right, try to do something where you avoid that MEP, right? And back to the original question that I had for you was, what the budget, right? So what would you say is a budget if they're having to do MEP? I'm not holding you to any sort of pricing. I want you to know that. I'm not saying, hey, what are you going to charge? No. What I'm saying is, what sort of budget should they have? Permits in, architectural design, the extra engineers that are going to get involved. Like, what's the price difference if they're looking to do, let's say, 4 units with no MEP versus trying to do 4 units with MEP?
So the MEP consultants, like, per se, I'm doing a duplex, ADU duplex right now in La Mesa. And the cost for MEP for that, and they're each, shy of 1,200 square feet each unit. For that particular MEP consultant was around $8,000. Okay. For those plans. Right. But see, you like I was saying, it's a duplex. So a lot of the times, they're gonna design one, and it's gonna mirror into the other one. So it's like, there'll be a fluctuation of pricing, let's say, for the same amount of square footage. So let's say you have, like I just did a triplex that we're doing over in somewhere in San Diego. And the MEP, so that's 3 units. They're all different sizes. They all have different layouts. And that's close to 4,000 square feet of construction. That MEP is like 16 to 18,000. Right. So it's
going to vary.
It's going to vary.
Like rule of thumb is, more units is probably more money.
Yeah, but also like when you're looking at you're preparing for a development as a developer, repetitiveness and kind of like designing something that you can multiply in either in the same parcel, when different parcels and all that stuff, something that that makes sense to you, because most of the developers are going to be like, how much is this going to cost me, always, right. They want that number. So when they look at this parcel and say, oh, this parcel or this property is, $500,000 or whatever it's the price, they know that if they implement this design that they already started developing, maybe at another parcel, they say, okay, I know this construction is going to cost me $1 million.
Smart. Okay.
So then when they buy this $500,700 or whatever price of this parcel, they're like, okay, I know I'm going in 1.7 and I'm going to ROI this much from it.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
So from a developer standpoint, repetitiveness, like right now, I'm in the same design. I'm already on the 4th development of the same design. Wow. For this particular developer.
And of course, you help them out a little bit, right? Since you're just...
Yeah, the only thing that really changes, get a good surveyor, get a good civil engineer. Okay. That also helps a lot, know. But But yeah, obviously that's gonna be the one that changes the things. Obviously, structural plans are gonna change depending on the site. Obviously, if you're really lucky and you always find the cheapest, flattest type of parcel, and you continue repeating these designs, then you always kind of have the same cost.
Right.
But obviously, that's not the real world. But at least construction wise, based on your last design or construction, then you know how much you're going to go in, at least from the beginning. Your structural might change a little bit because footings may get bigger or smaller. Your geotechnical engineer, also the report, and your civil engineer, it's going to differ, right, from that. But at least construction wise, architectural wise, you have a base to start off.
Right.
So when you're trying to buy something, your price point.
Got it. Okay. Just for sake of giving a number, I would probably say, it sounds like it just varies too much. You can't really throw the number out, right?
Right. It just depends on what it is that you're doing. For instance, this client for the duplex ADU, he's around with our services, including MEP and CD fees.
And permits and school fees and all that.
Yeah, so he's around $35,000.
And how many units is it going to be? 2 units. Okay. Yeah. So, but you can find probably another project like that where it's only 2 units and it's not going to reach to the $35,000, right? It just really depends.
It might be more.
Wow.
Okay. It just doesn't. It depends because Okay, and also I should clarify that.
The reason why I'm digging on this is because there are listeners that will be the people that have done a few and now they're getting ready to jump into it brand new. There's also a bunch of listeners that are like, God, you guys are boring me for the last 10 minutes because I already know what it costs, right? But the reason why I want to at least see if we can get to a ballpark number or even just a per unit or per door number is because I would love to provide our listeners with at least a number that if they're going to be starting developers, for them to just know what the chunk is of planning, right? So that's kind of why I keep pushing on you with this one. But ultimately, from what I'm gathering, I'm like, you know what, I'm listening to Sergio, but it just depends on what the city's going to ask for, right? It depends on the size and it depends on how you break it all down, right?
Yeah, because it's the site development part. So, and there's also, let's say if you're in an area where the city is going to make you do public improvements, like sidewalks, water meters, sewer and all that stuff. This client in La Mesa, they had to pave the street.
Wow.
Stuff like that.
And multi-tenant stuff, usually the first thing that has to get upgraded is the meter, right?
Or at least add a new one for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Which is it's like 30, 40 grand. Right off the bat. Okay. So these are the types of nuggets that I want to give them. So MEP can be 10 grand, can be 20 grand.
Yeah.
Street improvements and water meter upgrades could be anywhere between 30 to even 60.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then design, we come back to that same 20. Right. So, or 20 to 30, maybe even.
Yeah.
So just coming in, I would say, and yes, you obviously don't want to be at 80 to 100 grand.
Yes.
You don't want to be there. However, that's probably a healthy budget to start out with, just in the planning, right? So that as you're doing your numbers, because remember, right, when people are doing numbers, they've already figured out their assets, their loans, and they're getting ready to make decisions, right? So they're gonna, as they go to make decisions, they're gonna say, I'm gonna splice this much out for planning, I'm gonna splice this much out for building, right? And that's kind of what I'm trying to
So let me so I have another project over City of San Diego. It's gonna be a duplex 2-story ADU on a single family lot, and we budget that with fees. I think it was 85,000. That's like they like to say out the door kind of thing. From design to permitting.
When I was
fees and all that stuff.
When I was typing this question down, I was like, it's gonna be like 80 grand. So I'm glad I'm like right there, but I would say a healthy number for the listeners to take away is probably going to be 80 to 100 grand.
Yeah.
And if you can, and listen, there's always room, right, for scaling that down. If you can find a licensed contractor that's going to help you out and be favorable to you. If there's a particular engineer that just happened to do you a favor, so, but in the end, if you don't want to waste time, have that money ready, right?
Yeah.
And which leads me to my next question.
Yeah.
And actually I want to touch on the survey. I know why you mentioned it's important to have a survey and a good civil engineer, but just maybe 2 or 3 pieces of information why you think it's so vital to having a survey done with a good civil engineer.
All right, two scenarios, let's say. So let's say you already have a developed site and there's a house that exists there, right? Mm-hmm. And you're doing an addition to as an ADU or whatnot, whatever it is that the project's going to be. You want to, there's no information in any city that it's readily available that tells you where is the building exactly located against your property lines. Mm-hmm. Fences are very deceiving. They could be easements.
Yeah, and I want to highlight what you just said right now.
Yeah,
the city does not know. Okay, until you do a proper survey, the city doesn't actually have a clear record of where your property line sits.
No,
right.
I mean, for the most part, no.
Right, and because things shift, because old records could be dated and what have you. That's why you need the engineer to come out and literally mark your property line for you.
Yeah,
right?
And then there's different levels of when you get asked. Let's say you don't want to invest in that on the survey. You might get asked for it in construction, like what happened in Vancouver.
I'm doing that right now. No, not just in Vancouver. I'm doing that another project right now. And I was talking with the particular architect who I know really well. Yeah, and she was just like, "Well, Manny, I told them 3 times I recommend a survey, but they didn't want to do it."
Yeah,
right?
And it might. I mean, when you're crunching numbers, you're saying I need to put aside $85,000 for fees, and you add another, $3,000 to $5,000 in survey, and you're like, that it starts looking very steep. But when you start construction and they ask for a foundation certification. Mm-hmm. And they want to make sure that you are exactly 4 feet, 5 feet, whatever it is from property line because you're too close, and you're like a few inches off. Mm-hmm.
I have horror stories, man.
Guess what?
Both from the client and dude, I just had to do this a month and a half ago. I had to move all my forms.
Yeah,
in total it's 1,200 square feet. Yeah, but I had my form out, and my client was like, I have a survey that's going to come out and they can do the survey. And I was like, nah, you're like 4.5 feet. You're good. You're fine. Whatever. Yeah. Dude, she brought out the survey guy and we were 8 inches off on one side or on the front. Mm-hmm. And the building itself was like not straight on. It was supposed to be a little tip this way. So we were 8 inches off and 2 inches over there. Yeah. And I had to move the whole form, dude. I had to dig out the trench. But it was on us. Yeah. Because here I was. I just wanted to, get it done, which is good. As a contractor, you're going to keep the project moving, but ultimately I should have known better. You know what I mean? And that, and then like you said, right? So another situation. Yeah. The client I have is building a little tiny addition to already small unit, but she's trying to make it she's trying to take it from a studio to a 1-bedroom, right? And I just learned from you that ADUs under 16 feet in the city of San Diego can be up to the property line in most cases, right? Yeah, and that was news to me because I was always used to the 4 feet setback, 4 feet setback, 4 feet setback. It's like, for the last 4 or 5 years, whatever. But it was drawn out at 4 feet. Mm-hmm. But when we actually went to do the footing, it was only 2 feet of space. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, cool, we could be on the property line, right? Mm-hmm. Just, but now because you've got only 2 feet, there's so many other things that now have to happen with the design. We can't put a window there. There's all sorts of other things.
Fire stuff.
Right. So had they just done the survey in the beginning, they could have designed it properly. They could have done all these things. And now they have to. Now we're on standstill. The good thing is, as builders, we're already used to hitting standstills and then saying, well, we can move on to something else. So the good thing is there's some conduit and some electrical we can do. So we started working on that, and we can continue to get the project moving. And because I have so much confidence in the architect and the way that the city of San Diego works, is I know once I have that survey, and this is important for everybody to know, is once you have that survey, there's not much an inspector can tell you after that, right? Once you have your plan done and once you have your survey done and you come out and the measuring and staking is everything's there, now they can't tell you squat.
Right. And then parcels sometimes, it happened recently to me in Spring Valley where, the map on record says certain measurements, then the surveyor goes out there and then the measurements are, in this case was to the advantage of the client, it was off like by 2 feet or something like that he gained from. But then, you need to get that recorded and all that stuff. But yeah, a good survey, it's a good way to start, a project. Even before you even hire your architect, designer, right, whoever, all that stuff, like that's something that you don't need to get too much information. Find someone that can help you. They're usually really busy. So, scheduling that with time, it's going to help the project.
Right, because you as an architect, if you have a survey done, then you know that your measurements are true.
Yeah, and you design with confidence.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny because it's the same client that's coming to you saying, well, just try to make it work. Mm-hmm. That when poop hits the fan, right? Yeah. Now it's the same client that's like, well, why didn't you do so? So it's almost not fair. But ultimately, as professionals, that's why it's our job to inform them, right? So with that being said, dude, we've gone 40 minutes, 45 minutes. That's great. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to like the last 2 things that I have, sure, so we can start to wrap up. So the first one is right here. So have you seen, because I can tell you stories, but with developers, have you seen where maybe not to their own fault, but just things that they didn't take into account, that ended up where the project just went south? And this doesn't necessarily have to be the whole construction build out planning experience. Maybe it could be that they anticipated that they would have a bunch of renters and then they didn't, or they anticipate that the property would flip for X amount of dollars and it didn't. And you don't have, obviously I'm not going to have you name names or anything, but just for our listeners out there, can you think of something that you saw a developer do that was like a major mistake that ended up costing them a lot of time or money?
I'd say, sometimes it's doing things without permits. Well, a lot of the times it's doing things without permits. Yeah. That usually, makes a big headache for everybody. Yeah. And I get it. You want to get there in and fast.
And at this level, as you say that, because, it's one thing to, go and like slap some drywall behind your garage door. Yeah. Right. But it's another thing to like buy a property that you already know has a bunch of unpermitted stuff. Yeah. And then you go to do other stuff knowing that the stuff is unpermitted, right?
Yeah, I have one property right now that has 3 unpermitted, let's say, areas that now gonna get permitted because we want to develop it. Right. So you won't be able to get a permit even if the city doesn't know about it. Right. When you present the plans, you want to be clear of what it is that that's there. That's why when I start doing my research, I ask the client for building records. I look in the city's website to see what kind of permits have they pulled before and all that stuff. And I try to do as much research as I can get from what's available from public records. Right. Look at deeds and all that stuff that it's available in the assessor's office and all that to know as much.
Is that something that's included in that feasibility report that you were talking about earlier, or is that like you can kind of expand into that?
That's expanded into that. Like usually the feasibility, it's more concentrated in square footage, dollar amounts, that kind of thing. And then once, let's say, we get hired, then we go into those those details, or sometimes it's in conversation in the first meet with the client and say, we can tell.
Right.
Sometimes, when things are done without permits,
right.
There's always has a certain architectural features about it, to say the least. That looks, that looks like that something didn't happen the way it should. But it's I always think about it as like whenever you, hopefully never, but whenever you get committed with committed with a crime, let's say, and you hire a lawyer, you want to tell your lawyer exactly what happened. What is it that, you did exactly.
That's a great analogy.
So that he can know how to get you out of that hole.
Right. Right.
So
and it's the lawyer's job to present the information that's going to help your case, right?
Exactly.
I love it. That's so true. That's so true. It's so good. Yeah.
So then, that's part of our job. It's that investigative, how we're going to help you using our knowledge and our tools to get you out of that trouble, even if you're not there yet.
Right.
But eventually it's going to happen because you want to develop that site.
I want to touch on the point that you just made right now and use that same analogy, because as contractors, when we walk, because we'll do that sometimes where we have to walk a property that they already got flagged, and so we have to bring it back up to code, right? So same thing, right? So we know what the inspectors are looking for, and we also know which cities are tougher than others, right? So rule of thumb is when you're going to buy a property that you plan to retrofit, right? Let's say you buy a multi-tenant building, which we're seeing a lot of. Let's say you're buying a multi-tenant building that you see has garage spaces under that you're going to retrofit, right? Or let's say you have a multi-tenant already, but it has something in the back, right? That you're going to build something in the back that's freestanding, right? But as you walk the property, you can already tell there's some funhouse stuff going on outside that you're like, this is going to get flagged the moment you bring an inspector out here, right? So another piece of information or piece of advice that I would give developers when they're looking at builder-friendly properties, if you're going to look at a building that's retrofit, have a good relationship with a contractor, make a good relationship with a contractor and an architect, I would say, and just go do a visit. You know what I mean? Go do a visit, take a look at it, and that way both of them can tell you from their experience what you're going to have to do in the short term, and then if the inspector gets overzealous about an inspection or whatever, then you might have to do this, right? So I think it's important to know that when when it comes to those type of properties, because the whole reason we got to this point was because we asked, what are some things that you see, or have you seen a developer make a crucial mistake? And you talked about unpermitting. I actually agree with you. I think that's probably the biggest thing is when you try to build around or on the property, right, where there's a bunch of unpermitted stuff going on, because all you're doing is, raising a bunch of red flags for the inspector. Yeah,
and especially if you're gonna, let's say you end up doing all that and you start renting it to tenants. I've seen, like yesterday I walked a property. They're gonna demolish an addition because they're gonna do an ADU, and the tenant who was living there, we don't know this for a fact, but after they left, that's when they got the code enforcement. So sometimes, it's going to be the neighbor, it's going to be the tenant, let's say you do all these developments without permits and you get people live there and all that stuff, and then you evict them for some reason, or they, you raise the rent because, that's the end, they've been there already a year and they have to leave, and they notice things that are kind of funky and stuff, and they're like, I think this guy doesn't have permits for any of this. I'm going to tell the city and let him deal with it because he kicked me out.
Right.
Or whatever. Right. So you want to have, make sure that, you cover yourself with, every scenario and every other area and kind of,
you're absolutely right. That's another thing, right? We're talking again, because the topic is builder friendly properties. Guess what? Yes, we're talking about the retrofit buildings that are not permanent, but also guess what? You're going to have to deal with tenants when you do construction, right? So some piece of information that I can apply there is one, make sure, just know that the moment construction starts, you already need to have a new lease agreement or an addendum with your tenants. At least establishing that they know you're doing construction. I do recommend my clients to give them some sort of like discount, you know, or something, just to say, hey, we're sorry for the trouble. And let me tell you, for any developers that are listening that are getting ready to do construction, if the contractor is saying, oh, you know, we'll do the best we can, from my experiences, I always tell them, listen, just tell the tenants it's going to be noisy. That's really what it is. It's going to be noisy, it's going to be loud, and it's going to be almost every day. You know what I mean? And it's not fun. So here's your contract or your lease agreement, and let us know how you want to move forward. Because listen, there's especially like we have a project right now. We have to do water shutoffs. We have to do electrical we have to shut off electrical. When we had to connect to the existing drain, and guess what? So here we are. We have to test all the drain tubes that we put in. So we have to fill them up with water, and we can't have anyone using water for that time. We got corrections because I'm being straightforward. We got corrections 2 times on that inspection. So we made the tenants have to do this 3 times, but it was because we got an inspector that was tough. Hey, I don't like where the clean out for your sink is. It's 6 inches too high. Lower it. You know what I mean? So you just never know. So you are going to have to deal with tenants if you're in a building. But yet, Sergio, thank you so much, man. I thought we were going to be scraping for like content, but it turns out, man, we just started it and like we could keep going. I actually had another, I'm not going to get into it, but I asked on Instagram yesterday, like what questions do you have an architect? And I got like 3 or 4 questions, but we're going to have to wait, man, because it's too much time. Andy's got to go home. He's going to start charging me overtime. No, I'm just kidding. But thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time, brother. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Awesome, man. Cool.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, that was a developer's contractor. I made up that name 2 days ago, but I like it. So thank you for listening, and be sure to follow and subscribe for more. Thanks.